I bet he can't even find the start button. What could a floor cleaner possibly know about a $9 million helicopter? Caleb Monroe's voice cut through the wind that howled across the rooftop, where the gleaming Bell 429 waited. He squinted toward Lucas Hale, the man in a faded uniform, kneeling as he scrubbed stubborn stains along the edge of the landing pad. Evelyn Cross, the cold-hearted CEO of Davenport Industries, stopped in her tracks. A faint, mocking smile appeared on her lips. "Sounds amusing." "Lucas Hale," she spoke, her hand with crimson-painted nails pointing straight at the steel beast. "If you can fly it, I'll marry you right here and now." The air froze. Gusts from Lake Union whipped Evelyn's expensive coat around her frame. Caleb burst out laughing, already imagining the story he would brag about at the bar that evening. But Lucas gave no reply. He simply wiped his hands slowly on a rag, then walked past them, opening the cockpit door with a movement so practiced it was chilling. Click. The seatbelt buckle locked into place. The rotor began to roar to life. And Evelyn suddenly shivered. She had just wagered something she could not control. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching this story from. It would be amazing if this tale could spread everywhere. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you can join us on our next journeys. The faint squeak of wheels echoed along the 48th floor hallway. The familiar scent of cleaning solution lingered in the air, mingling with the cold white glare of fluorescent lights. Lucas Hale, in his faded uniform, pushed a supply cart toward the row of ceiling-high glass windows. Seattle was bathed in the crimson glow of sunset, skyscrapers reflecting shimmering light across distant Lake Union. Beside him, Mr. Thomas, the old janitor, hair streaked with gray, smiled softly and handed Lucas a dry cloth. "Don't wipe side to side. It'll leave streaks. Go in circles, gently. Everyone sees the dirt, but only a sharp eye notices the faint marks when the sunlight hits." Lucas nodded and followed his guidance, each movement marked by unusual patience. A rare smile flickered across his face, though his eyes remained quiet, distant. Mr. Thomas patted his shoulder. "Remember, son, do the job right, even when no one is watching. That's what self-respect means." The words floated in the air like a tiny dust mote glimmering in the sunset. Lucas stayed silent, but the moment etched itself into him once again. To live as if unseen, yet never do anything carelessly. The next day, the rooftop of South Lake Union roared with wind. A gleaming Bell 429 sat there like a steel bird ready to take flight. Caleb Monroe folded his arms, his voice dripping with mockery. "I bet he can't even find the start button." What does a floor sweeper know about a $9 million helicopter? Evelyn Cross, the CEO of the corporation, cold and poised, let a contemptuous smile play at the corner of her lips. Her voice rang out against the wind. "Lucas Hale, if you can fly this iron bird, I'll marry you." The employees gathered on the rooftop held their breath. Caleb laughed gleefully, expecting a comedy show. But Lucas said nothing. He set down the rag, then walked toward the helicopter with steady composure. Click! The seatbelt snapped into place. His fingers moved across the control panel, precise down to the smallest detail. The turbine shrieked, the rotor spun, and the gusts whipped against Evelyn's face, wiping the smirk from her lips. The Bell 429 lifted off the pad, smooth as a bird's wings beating. It hovered 20 feet above, then suddenly dipped its nose in a graceful bow, a maneuver so flawless that even seasoned pilots struggled to perform it. Caleb was struck dumb, while Evelyn, for the first time in years, felt her heart skip a beat. Lucas set the helicopter down as lightly as placing a cup on a table. Shutting off the engine, he stepped out without a word, returning to his unfinished task, scrubbing the stain at the edge of the rooftop, as if nothing had happened. In the glass-walled office high above, hours later, Evelyn stood silent before the massive screen. Caleb handed her Lucas Hale's employee file. Only a few sparse lines. Address: the city's southern working-class district. Previous occupation: self-employed, logistics and transport. Time at the company: 8 months. Credit and legal record: spotless. No military, no flight academy, no aviation affiliations at all. Caleb shrugged, trying to regain his confidence. Probably just luck. A floor sweeper with a hobby. That's it. Evelyn didn't answer. She stared at the blurred ID photo on the screen. Eyes heavy, profound. A wall sealed tight that let no light escape. In her mind, the rotor's roar replayed, her heartbeat caught in that impossibly perfect flight path. She whispered, almost to herself, "No one hides that well only to push a janitor's cart. Who is he?" Seattle's nightlights reflected in the glass behind her, glimmering like thousands of watchful eyes. Evelyn clenched her fist, the thought drilling deeper. The invisible people in this building might not be invisible at all. And Lucas Hale was the first proof. The transparent glass wall of the 52nd floor boardroom was like a massive frame, reflecting the full panorama of Seattle glowing under a gloomy morning sky. Evelyn Cross sat at the head of the long walnut table, her hands clasped together. On the screen opposite, chairman of the board, Gerald Pike, appeared from New York, his stern face carved with wrinkles, his deep voice cold. "Takashima Holdings is wavering. I've been informed they're questioning the durability of our strategy. Evelyn, tell me, why is a deal prepared for 2 years now faltering at the very last moment?" Evelyn tightened her hands, drew in a deep breath. "We've made the final offer. Our price and terms are competitive. I believe it's still under control." Gerald narrowed his eyes. "Belief is not evidence. I don't need feelings. I need results." The air was so heavy that the tapping of a pen against the table could be heard clearly. Caleb Monroe, Evelyn's close aide, broke the silence, his voice calm but laced with overconfidence. "There is one way. The Japanese value humility. If we concede veto power over strategic logistics routes in North America, they'll see it as a gesture of goodwill, a small portion of control traded for long-term trust. I believe this is the only path forward." Evelyn turned to him, her eyes icy sharp. "You're suggesting I give up the company's greatest advantage, control of the domestic supply chain?" Caleb shrugged, a thin smile on his lips. "Just a small portion." "But it would save the deal." Gerald cut in from the screen, his tone decisive. "Evelyn, I don't care whether you keep or lose control. I only need the agreement signed. If Takashima pulls out, the board will have to consider alternative leadership." The final words dropped like a hammer. The boardroom fell silent. Only the sound of wind rushing against the glass wall remained. Evelyn straightened her back, gave a slight nod. "I understand." Caleb leaned closer, murmuring just loud enough for her to hear. "Sometimes, true strength is knowing when to bend." Evelyn didn't reply, but her eyes flickered with inner conflict. Night descended on South Seattle. In a modest 2-bedroom apartment, warm yellow light glowed from the small kitchen. Lucas Hale stood chopping vegetables, the smell of stir-fried meat blending with the scent of hot tortillas. "Daddy!" Lila's voice rang from the living room. The 8-year-old, her curly brown hair a mess, was busy with a volcano model. "It's ready!" Add the baking soda now. Lucas set the knife down, wiped his hands on a towel. He walked over, watching his daughter excitedly pour red vinegar inside. The little volcano erupted in a froth of white foam, spilling across the desk. Lila burst into laughter, her eyes shining bright. Isn't it cool? Tomorrow I'm bringing it to class. Lucas chuckled, hugging her. You did great, Firefly. But make sure to clean up before bed, or this whole place will turn into a lava desert. In the living room, the walls were covered with colorful drawings, spaceships, sunflowers, even a child's sketch of a woman in a flight suit. On the small wooden table, an old photo frame sat neatly. Sarah, his wife, her radiant smile and arm resting over Lucas's shoulder, back when he still wore an Air Force flight suit. Lucas froze for a moment. He gently turned the photo face down, then swiveled his daughter's chair completely toward the wall instead of the window. Outside, the sound of a commercial plane roared past, blinking lights piercing the night. He stared until the noise faded, only then letting his shoulders drop, protecting his daughter, shielding her from the roar of engines. That was the obsession carved deep within him. In the darkened Davenport glass tower, the invisible ones quietly revealed other sides of themselves. The night security guard, after his shift, pulled an old violin from a wooden locker. The music lingered, echoing down the empty corridor, haunting and tender. The cafeteria worker, her hair streaked with gray, used her break to sketch quick portraits of colleagues. With just a few strokes, a face came alive. A mailroom clerk, after delivering the last package, sat with his old laptop, quietly writing lines of code. Blue light washed over his tired but eager face. All three blended into the crowd of daily labor, nameless, without glamorous titles. Yet their talents and passions were no less than those of any professional in the tower. From her high office, Evelyn looked down at the stream of employees leaving. Her eyes happened to catch fleeting images. The guard at the door, the cafeteria woman clearing tables, the mailroom boy closing his laptop. A brief stir flickered across her. Then she turned back to the Takashima deal on her screen. But a seed of doubt had been planted. Had the company she led unknowingly turned countless people into invisible beings? That night, while all of Seattle glowed under a drizzle, Evelyn sat alone in her glass office. On the screen before her was Gerald Pike's email, pressing for the Takashima agreement. Outside, the wind howled, the faint thrum of a commercial helicopter carried through the air. And in her mind, the calm face of Lucas Hale surfaced, the eyes that betrayed a hidden past, yet revealed nothing. That janitor. Who was he, really? On Saturday morning, a pale layer of white clouds hung over Seattle, sunlight breaking through onto the lakeside park, where Davenport Day, the annual festival employees half-jokingly called the Mandatory Fun Day, was underway. The grounds buzzed with energy. Multicolored banners strung along the trees, a bright bouncy castle swelling and deflating with children's laughter, rows of food trucks lining the road, the scent of grilled meat and hot coffee mingling in the air. Over 1,000 employees and their families gathered, a true company carnival. Evelyn Cross usually stayed only 15 minutes, cutting the ribbon at a booth, smiling for a few PR photos, then disappearing back into her glass tower. But this year, she decided to remain all day. Not out of enjoyment, but for one reason alone. Lucas Hale. On the grass near the lake, Lucas spread out an old checkered blanket. Leela crouched beside him, eyes shining, clutching a large leaf and a dry stick. "Daddy, we need this for the mast," she said eagerly. Lucas smiled, pulling a folding knife from his pocket, skillfully shaving the branch tip to fit. Together they tied it with a rubber band, and a small leaf boat appeared, wobbly but endearing. "It's going to carry the Frog King across the great sea," Lila exclaimed. Lucas laughed, his eyes gentler here than at any moment inside Davenport Tower. Here he was just a father, not the shadow of a buried past. Evelyn approached, her low-heeled shoes pressing softly into the grass. Her outfit, white silk blouse, light khaki trousers, made her look completely different from the icy CEO image everyone knew. But her cautious gaze still carried a trace of distance. "Lucas Hale," she called, her voice a little sharp. Lucas looked up, a flicker of caution in his eyes vanishing as quickly as it appeared. "Ma'am," he replied curtly. Evelyn hesitated for a second, then nodded slightly toward the girl. "This is your daughter?" "Lila," Lucas introduced, resting a hand on her shoulder. The girl stared at Evelyn, tilted her head, then bluntly asked, "Miss, why does your face look so serious? Are you mad at the grass under your feet?" Evelyn was caught off guard and let out a laugh. "No, no, I'm not mad at the grass." "Good," Lila nodded solemnly, then raised the little boat. "Look, it's going to carry the Frog King across the ocean." Evelyn glanced at the simple toy and, without thinking, replied, "A solid design." A fine naval architect indeed. Lucas pressed his lips together, the corner of his mouth threatening to smile. For a fleeting moment, the vast distance between CEO and Janitor blurred, replaced by a simple family scene. A high-pitched buzzing sliced through the air. A sleek drone circled overhead. The marketing VP, in a youthful plaid shirt, boasted to colleagues, "Just bought it last week. 8K camera. Wind resistance is perfect." The drone swooped low, spiraling above the checkered blanket. The crowd clapped and cheered. Lucas reacted instantly. His eyes narrowed, his body stiffened. In that split second, he was no longer a father playing with his daughter. He became something else, shoulders locked, muscles taut, gaze fixed on the target like a soldier locking in. And then the sound vanished. The world dropped into absolute silence. Only the pounding heartbeat remained, drumming like war. A commanding voice echoed from somewhere. "Clear. Lift. Go." A fleeting image. A woman's gloved hand slipping from a helicopter door latch, falling into nothingness. Lucas clenched his fist, a chill ripping down his spine. He turned his face away, inhaled deeply, forcing the memory back into the pit of his heart. The drone had flown off, its buzz fading. No one but Evelyn caught the change in his eyes, the flicker of something dark and terrifying. "Daddy, can I have ice cream?" Lila tugged at his hand cheerfully, oblivious. Lucas forced a smile, stood up. "Sure, Firefly." He gripped her hand tightly and led her away. Evelyn stood rooted. The cold sharpness usually in her eyes was now replaced by astonishment and suspicion. This was not the reaction of a hobbyist. This was battlefield instinct. A few dozen meters away, Caleb Monroe watched quietly. Sunlight glinted on the thin frame of his glasses, concealing his malicious delight. He pulled out his phone, typed quickly, "CEO distracted." "Accelerate timeline message sent." The screen went dark. Caleb slipped the phone away, shoved his hands into his pockets, and strolled toward the finance booth. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold smile. The game had entered its next move. On the surface of the lake, Lila's little leaf boat drifted and rocked among small ripples. The afternoon sun spread across the water, shimmering like shards of broken glass. Evelyn stood watching, her heart heavy. She had just witnessed something no one else noticed. Beneath the janitor's shell, Lucas Hale carried a past as heavy as a storm. And, for Evelyn Cross, a woman who always believed she could read anyone. For the first time in her life, there was a man she could not fathom. Monday afternoon, the glass office at the very top floor glowed cold and sterile like an operating room. The large screen lit up, showing Gerald Pike's latest email. Takashima Holdings views the logistics concession as a sign of weakness. They are demanding a larger stake and 2 permanent seats on the North America Regional Board. If we refuse, the deal is off. Evelyn Cross read the words over and over. The numbers on the spreadsheet cut coldly like blades. An additional 10% stake, veto power over transportation, and now board seats. This was no longer negotiation. This was surrender. She dropped her hands onto the table, exhaling sharply. Since when had the CEO's chair, the pinnacle of power, felt like shackles in a courtroom? Caleb Monroe entered, his face feigning busyness, though his eyes gleamed. He placed a thick stack of documents on the desk. Bad news, I know. But we still have a way out. If we sign, at least the deal survives. The board can't accuse you of incompetence. Evelyn looked up, suspicion flashing in her eyes. You think I should sell off the very core of what my father built this company on? You think Takashima will stop here? Caleb shrugged, his tone light as air. Evelyn, sometimes keeping your seat is more important than keeping your principles. If you collapse, there'll be nothing left to protect. His words slipped into her mind like venom. He was acting loyal, but his eagerness betrayed the ambition underneath. If she failed, who would step in to replace her? That night, the 48th floor hallway lay silent. Neon light spilled onto the floor, reflecting the shadow of a man scrubbing at the glass wall. Lucas Hale. Evelyn entered the empty boardroom, her heels echoing loud. She stopped, watching his reflection in the transparent pane, her voice firm. I didn't come here to talk about your job. I came to talk about another job. Lucas looked up, his eyes somber. I only have one job. Janitor, stop hiding. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. I saw your reflexes at the picnic. That wasn't habit. That was battlefield instinct. He stayed silent, hands still moving across the glass, perfect circles leaving no streaks behind. Evelyn clenched her fists. The Takashima deal is collapsing. There's only one way left to save it. Meet Masato Ito on Galliano Island. He's the only one who can turn this around. But to get there, I need a pilot. Tonight. My pilot, Ryan Porter, can't fly, and I don't trust anyone else. Lucas set the cloth down, turned to face her. His expression was a stone wall. I don't fly anymore. I don't fly for anyone. You will fly, Evelyn answered, steel flashing in her eyes. Not for me, but for the little girl at your home. Lucas's eyes darkened. Evelyn spoke slowly, each word cutting like a blade. I know you spend a third of your paycheck on Lila's medication. I know the insurance cap is nearly maxed out. And I know every time she coughs at night, you sit awake by her side. Isn't that true? The air froze. Lucas's fists clenched, veins bulging, knuckles white, trembling slightly. In his head, Sarah's voice returned, the whir of rotors, the shout, Clear! Lift! Go! And then the hand slipping from the helicopter door latch. He shut his eyes. A crack ripped through the wall of silence he had built for so long. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice softer now, but pressing hard. One flight. Take me to Ito and back. In return, I'll establish a private trust fund, covering every medical and educational expense for Lila. For life. No more worries. Ever, Lucas opened his eyes. Pain from the past, love for his daughter, and the anger of being cornered twisted together in his gaze. He exhaled, his voice low and rough as grinding steel. "Fine. But we need conditions." Evelyn nodded. "Name them." He stepped forward, his tone flat and cold. "First, the trust fund will be set up by my lawyer, not yours. It must be fully funded before I take off. Second, this is not an employee relationship. I am not your employee. I'm only contracted for this flight. Once we land back in Seattle, it ends. You don't know me, I don't know you. Third, you follow every command I give in the air. No arguing, no questions. Otherwise, we both die." Evelyn held his gaze without blinking, then nodded. "I accept." Lucas drew in a deep breath, slipped the cloth into his pocket. For the first time, he addressed her by name. "We fly tonight, Evelyn." Before the storm off the bay hits, she nodded, and for a fleeting moment, between the powerful CEO and the nameless janitor, an invisible bond was tied, not by trust, but by a contract of life and death. Night fell over Seattle, the sky weighed down with heavy black clouds. At Boeing Field, KBFI, the distant roar of jet engines echoed, yellow lights shimmering across the rain-slicked runway. On the private apron, Evelyn's Bell 429 sat silent, its steel frame gleaming, catching flashes of lightning to the west. Lucas Hale wore an old leather jacket, dark cargo pants, fingerless gloves. He moved quietly around the helicopter, flashlight sweeping across every pipe, every rotor joint, every trace of oil on the frame. There was nothing janitorial about his motions. Every touch, every tap was precise, exacting, like the ritual of a warrior. Fuel line stable. Rotor no cracks. Hydraulics holding, he muttered, marking notes on a paper checklist, leaving no electronic record. He extended a hand. Tablet. Evelyn handed over a device already cut off from the company network. Lucas opened it. Updated satellite imagery. Wind charts, overlapping cloud layers. "Crosswind will hit 80 knots through the strait," he frowned. "We'll have to skirt the edge of the jet stream. Otherwise we'll be thrown against the ridge." Evelyn stood nearby, cold wind whipping her thin silk jacket. She watched Lucas bend over the control panel, the light reflecting off his hardened face, wholly focused. Before her was no janitor pushing a cleaning cart. This was a commander, a man who had survived storms most never returned from. The rotors roared to life, each blade tearing into the night. The Bell 429 lifted off, tilting, then lunged into darkness. The city of Seattle shrank below, its lights like fading stars in the rainy mist. Within 30 minutes, the storm swallowed everything. Rain hammered the windshield like thousands of needles. Wind howled, the helicopter shuddering violently. Evelyn gripped the armrests, nails digging into the leather. Every jolt sent her stomach lurching into her throat. All her years in the CEO's chair had never made her feel so powerless. Lucas glanced at her, his voice calm, almost cold. "Look at me. I've got you. Just breathe. This is only weather. I've flown through worse." Evelyn forced air into her lungs, her eyes locked on his dark gaze. Amid the chaos, that gaze held steady, like an anchor in the storm. The helicopter pitched, alarms shrieked. Crosswinds slammed at 80 knots, threatening to drive the rotors into the mountainside. Lucas pulled the stick hard, hands shifting ceaselessly, sweat streaking his temple, but his voice never faltered. "Hold tight." Dropping us to a stable layer. The aircraft dove, Evelyn's stomach flipping. Her heartbeat pounded. But in Lucas's eyes there was no fear, only absolute focus, like a man playing a score he knew by heart. A sharp turn. Suddenly, the alarms ceased. The craft steadied, still buffeted but holding firm. Evelyn exhaled, her body collapsing back into the seat. And inside her, something she had never known surged: absolute trust in someone beyond her control. After nearly 2 hours of storm, the Bell 429 descended. Lanterns flickered faintly in the dark. Galliano Island. A narrow runway, winds lashing through. Lucas banked the helicopter, setting it down softer than expected. Evelyn stepped out, her heels sinking in mud, the air thick with damp wood and sea salt. Ahead stood a simple wooden house, golden light spilling from its windows. On the porch, Masato Ito waited, tall, slender, in traditional coat, his eyes piercing. Inside, the faint fragrance of green tea lingered. Ito poured tea into ceramic cups, his movements deliberate. Evelyn began her pitch. Profit figures, growth charts, market projections. She poured every ounce of CEO power into her words, her gaze sharp, each syllable like a bullet. But Ito only sipped his tea, face unmoved. When she finished, he shook his head gently. "You speak of profit, of market share, of balance sheets. But those exist only today. Tomorrow, they may vanish." Evelyn faltered. Ido set his cup down, voice slow and measured. "I once met your father. 20 years ago, a great storm collapsed the supply chain. One of his small vendors stood at the brink of ruin. He could have let them fail to protect his profits, but he did not. He kept the contract, shouldered the loss, so they survived the season. That was loyalty. That was humanity. And that is why Takashima trusted him for 3 decades." Evelyn's eyes dimmed. She realized everything she had just presented, numbers, graphs, was meaningless in this man's worldview. The air grew heavy, silence stretching. Evelyn bowed her head, her hand clenched white. From the corner, Lucas's voice broke through, low and resolute. "I don't know anything about this deal, but I know one thing. When a plan breaks in 5 minutes, you don't trust the plan. You trust the one flying beside you." Ito's gaze pierced him, old eyes suddenly alight. He turned back to Evelyn, not as the cold CEO, but as the woman who had earned a man like Lucas Hale's trust in the storm. A slow smile spread across Ito's face. He reached for an old rotary phone. "Takashima-san," he said as the line connected, his tone calm yet heavy as stone. "We will continue discussions. Davenport has not lost its soul." Outside, rain still drummed on the wooden roof. Evelyn sat motionless, chest rising and falling, eyes glistening. For the first time in years, she had not won through logic or power, but through something far simpler: trust. She glanced at Lucas. He only sat there, silent, like a shadow. Yet that shadow had just preserved the future of the Cross Empire. In the pitch-black night sky, the Bell 429 sliced southward through the wind. Inside the cockpit, the glow of the control screens reflected on Evelyn Cross's face, tense, pale. A ping sounded from the satellite-linked tablet. Evelyn opened the inbox, her heart sinking. Subject: Emergency Board Meeting, 8 a.m. In light of indications that CEO Evelyn Cross has exhibited abnormal behavior and misused company assets for an unauthorized trip, the board will convene an emergency session to consider leadership replacement. Her hands trembled. "Caleb. He set me up," Evelyn whispered. "This trip is exactly the evidence he needed." Lucas cast a quick glance, his eyes cold as steel. "Then we get back in time." Before 8 a.m., Evelyn turned toward him, horrified. "Impossible. We've got at least 4 hours of flight left. Even with full tailwind, it's not enough." Lucas pointed at the radar screen, a narrow red streak along the edge of the storm mass. "Jet stream. Right on the storm's rim. If we ride it, we cut the time in half." Evelyn's jaw dropped. You'd fly into that? It's like riding a bull in the middle of a hurricane. Lucas answered flatly, eyes never leaving the controls. Yes. And it's the only way you don't lose your father's company. The helicopter shook violently as it hit the swirling current. Evelyn was slammed back into her seat, the harness biting into her. Outside the windshield, lightning split the sky apart. She fought to keep her voice steady, but it cracked. Do you know why I have to hold this company? Gerald Pike, Caleb, the whole board. They all see me as just Cross's daughter, an heiress, unworthy. I've spent 10 years proving I'm not just my father's shadow. If they take it away, everything I've done means nothing. Lucas stayed silent for a beat. Then he spoke, voice rough, deliberate. You think losing the company is losing everything? Trust me, there are things 1,000 times worse. He gripped the cyclic tighter, memories crashing in. Sarah, my wife. We were both Air Force rescue pilots. The last mission was simple: extract medics from a valley. But the intel was wrong. The enemy was waiting. We followed every procedure, every lesson, every move. And still, lost 2 teammates. Lost Sarah. His voice broke, but his hands stayed firm. I held her hand in the cockpit. She died before we cleared the mountains. That's when I learned. You can do everything right and still lose. Evelyn froze. For the first time, she saw beneath the cold exterior a grief without bottom. Lucas inhaled, yanked the stick hard. The helicopter plunged into the spiral winds. Engines screamed. Evelyn bit her lip until it bled, eyes locked on him. In that moment, she no longer saw a janitor or even a pilot. She saw a man wrestling both storm and past and still choosing to protect others. The horizon glowed purple as dawn broke. Seattle emerged, shimmering beneath shredded clouds. Lucas descended onto the South Lake Union helipad, the rain-soaked surface glistening in the morning light. The clock read 7:47 a.m. The rotors slowed to a stop. Evelyn unclipped her harness, her hands trembling. We made it back in time. But in that boardroom, I'll be torn apart. Caleb has already scripted everything Lucas turned, his gaze steady, his voice unwavering. Then we changed the script. You'll go in there, argue, react, let them believe you're cornered. You'll be the decoy. While they focus on you, I'll do the rest. Evelyn stared at him. You want me to pretend to lose, so you can... What? Lucas answered simply. End Caleb's game. Once and for all, the morning wind howled across the rooftop. Evelyn pressed her lips tight, then nodded. In her eyes, for the first time, there was not just reluctance, but trust. That morning, Davenport Tower's grand boardroom was packed. Morning light cut through the vast glass wall, cold as a blade. Gerald Pike sat at the head of the table, his face like stone. Board members quietly flipped through their documents, the air thick with the scent of an impending trial. The doors swung open. Evelyn Cross entered. Gone was the image of the powerful CEO. What radiated now was tension, her voice sharp as she sat down. You want to try me for saving this company? And Caleb Monroe sits here like he's a saint? Caleb smiled calmly, his suit immaculate, hands folded in front of him. Evelyn, he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. No one wants to try you. But everyone is concerned about the stability of the company. Flying into a storm with a maintenance worker? That is not sound leadership. Evelyn shot to her feet, pointing straight at him. You're the one who sabotaged the Takashima deal. Don't think I don't know. Gerald frowned, his tone heavy. Miss Cross, please restrain yourself. To the board, Evelyn looked like an unhinged CEO, exactly the script Caleb had written, and precisely what Lucas needed. Meanwhile, in the basement server room, Lucas Hale approached the security door. He swiped his card. Red light. Keycard disabled. A figure stepped from the guard station. The head of security. A grizzled ex-Marine with shoulders like brick walls. He narrowed his eyes at Lucas. Lucas lowered his voice, gaze fixed and unblinking. "I need in. Miss Cross needs this to survive." A long pause. The Marine didn't ask further. He only searched those iron eyes, recognizing the battlefield instinct he knew too well. Then he gave a slight nod. "Go." Green light flashed. Lucas stepped into the server room, the whir of cooling fans filling the air, LED lights blinking like stars. He sat before an open terminal, fingers flying as though he'd been waiting for this moment. He wrote a script to create a bottleneck, forcing all data traffic through a single partition. When the network failed, Caleb would have to enter to fix it, and when he touched it, Lucas would catch him. The code ran. Red warnings flashed. Then, suddenly, the system glitched. A side branch of data rerouted to an off-site server. Caleb could wipe everything remotely. "Damn it!" Lucas growled. He pulled another tool, a keystroke mirror. No need to crack locks. He'd shadow every keystroke Caleb typed, recording it all, like a camera aimed at the man's hands. He hit execute. Sweat beaded his brow. Each second dragged like an hour. In the boardroom, alarms blared. The giant screen behind Gerald lit up. Network integrity failure. Critical board members stirred in panic. Evelyn sprang up, voice hard. "See? This is what happens when you listen to him." Caleb feigned concern. "Excuse me, I need to handle this. Likely just a glitch in the backup server." He rushed out, tie flapping. In the server room, Lucas was ready. He saw the login, C. Monroe. Caleb at his private terminal, pounding keys. Through the mirror, Lucas watched Caleb open a hidden partition, K_archive, and type the command, purge partition, K_archive anchor. True, Lucas didn't stop him. He let it run. The system shuddered, data erased, but the mirror captured everything. Every character, every space, every timestamp. Unimpeachable evidence. 10 minutes later, Caleb returned to the boardroom, wiping his brow, forcing a smile. "It's done. Just an old data packet looping. I've cleared it. The system's stable now." Gerald nodded, cold. "Thank you, Monroe. We will resume." The door burst open. Lucas entered. No janitor's uniform, just a dark leather jacket. Boots still muddy from the helipad. He strode straight to the table, setting a tablet before Gerald. "It wasn't a glitch. This is what really happened." He pressed play. On the giant screen, the board watched line by line. Caleb Monroe's login, the timestamp matching the very hour of the board meeting, and the final command, purge partition, K_archive anchor. True. The room fell into dead silence. Evelyn turned, her voice icy. "While I stand here accused of destabilizing, my aide was deleting confidential data with a competitor. This is no accident. This is betrayal." Caleb's face drained of color, but he screamed, "Fabrication! He's a hacker. He's just a janitor. Are you really going to trust a floor sweeper over me?" Gerald looked from Lucas to Caleb. The mask of calm on Caleb's face had shattered. "Security!" 2 guards stepped in, seizing Caleb's arms. He kicked and shouted, "You'll regret this! I only wanted justice. The doors slammed shut, cutting off the echo. Evelyn sank back into her chair, exhaling hard, her face a mixture of exhaustion and pride. Gerald nodded gravely. "Miss Cross, we owe you an apology." As the board dispersed, Lucas stood in a corner, silent. A young employee from finance passed, his eyes lingering on the guards dragging Caleb away. The young man had once been mentored by Caleb. His gaze was conflicted. Gratitude, regret, bitterness. Lucas caught the look, his own eyes heavy. He knew too well. Talent, misused, could destroy everything. Outside the windows, morning light flooded in, draping the long wooden table where a battle had just been fought without weapons, but no less brutal than war. After the shock in the boardroom, Davenport Industries ran as usual again. Headlines flooded the press. Trusted aide betrays. CEO turns the tables. Shareholders were reassured. The Takashima deal was restarted. But Evelyn Cross felt empty. She walked through the gleaming hallways, hearing the clatter of keyboards, the ring of phones, yet everything seemed lifeless. The name Lucas Hale existed only as rumor. He had sent one short email. I terminate the contract. Thank you. LH. No contact number left behind. No reward collected. Not even the final paycheck picked up. The company was saved, but its soul had vanished with the shadow of the janitor. A week later, Evelyn stepped onto the stage in the grand auditorium. Thousands of employees filled the seats. Normally, she would present quarterly reports or speak of targets, but today her voice was warm, different. For 10 years, I measured Davenport's success by market share, profit, stock price. I was wrong. The hall rippled with murmurs. Evelyn drew a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across every face. A company is not numbers. A company is people. The night guard who plays violin in the garage, the cafeteria worker who can sketch portraits with charcoal, the mailroom clerk who writes code to automate small tasks. They are all around us, but we've overlooked them. She paused, her tone firm. That ends today. I announce the creation of the Department of Human Potential, a 3-tier program. First, assess the hidden skills of every employee. Second, peer mentorship, where the skilled guide the new. Third, internal scholarships, funding anyone with a worthy idea. Thunderous applause erupted. For the first time, Evelyn felt excitement spread. Not for stock prices, but for hope. That afternoon, she visited Ryan Porter, the official pilot just returning after his son's illness. The man was thinner, eyes shadowed, but his gaze still bright. Ryan, Evelyn said, her voice sincere, I owe you an apology. I let the system render talented people like you invisible. You should have been heard, not replaced in silence. Ryan froze briefly, then smiled, tired but genuine. If you truly change that, then everything I went through was worth it. One weekend afternoon, Evelyn passed by a small park in South Seattle. Children's laughter rang out. She stopped. Before her, Lucas knelt in the sandbox, building a sandcastle with little Lila. He wore an old t-shirt, hands caked with sand, but his gaze was gentler than she had ever seen. Evelyn walked closer. Lila looked up, beaming. I finished the tower. Evelyn smiled, then looked at Lucas. You hide well. I had 3 HR departments searching, and they still couldn't find you. Lucas brushed sand off, standing, his tone cold. I wasn't hiding. I just didn't want to be found. Evelyn faced him, unflinching. I need you. I want you to lead the new department. Who else can see hidden talent, if not someone who once lived invisible himself? Lucas shook his head. I'm not a manager. I'm nobody. Evelyn started to reply, but Lila tugged her father's sleeve, tilting her head. Daddy, she's right. You fixed the helicopter. You fixed her company. You fix everything. Lucas froze. He looked at his daughter, then at Evelyn. In their eyes, he saw the same thing: trust. And for the first time in years, he nodded. "All right, I'll try." Sunset gilded the glass roof of Davenport Tower. On the rooftop, Lucas stood beside Evelyn, while Lila ran about with a small kite in her hands. The Department of Human Potential had become the company's pride. A mailroom clerk, now an aspiring graphic designer, a night guard hosting an internal concert, internal promotions up 15% in just 6 months. "You made this real," Evelyn said. Her gaze softened. Lucas looked around, face solemn but warm. "No, they did. I only opened the door," Lila ran back, clasping both their hands, the three of them forming a small circle beneath the fiery dusk. One evening, Evelyn stood beside the Bell 429 on the rooftop. Lucas was preparing for a test flight. "You promised to teach me a few moves," she said, half playful. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Dual controls. But you follow orders." She slid into the co-pilot's seat. Lucas placed her hand on the collective, his hand covering hers, guiding each subtle motion. The helicopter shivered, then lifted off the ground. Evelyn held her breath, the sensation strange, yet utterly safe. Lucas leaned slightly, his voice low. "Trust me. We're flying together." It was no hasty promise, but the foundation of something else. Slow, steady. And that is how a quiet janitor, carrying a past full of loss, changed an entire empire. Not with numbers, but with trust and the power of people. What do you think? How many talents around us are being overlooked, simply because no one takes a closer look? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. It would be wonderful to see this story spread across the world. If the story of Evelyn, Lucas, and Lila touched your heart, please support True Tale Time by hitting subscribe and turning on the notification bell. There are many more journeys of the invisible waiting to be told. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, sometimes when you fix people, not just machines, you're fixing the world.